You're listening to the Beercraft Beer and Brewing Podcast. Tune in every Wednesday night at 6:30 Pacific for a dose of beer and brewing banter with your hosts, Ben Holm and Andrew Ziegler.
A 24-pack of wit and wisdom in the Pacific Northwest, because it's always beer 30 on The Beercraft.
Fresh, perfectly carbonated, and always on tap. Welcome back to the Beercraft Beer and Brewing Podcast, where we make brewing as much fun as drinking. I'm Ben.
And I'm Andrew. Today we're talking about one of the best upgrades you can make as a homebrewer, something that takes your beer from good to downright professional.
That's right, we're talking kegerators, because bottling is a chore. If you're tired of scrubbing bottles, measuring priming sugar, and waiting weeks for carbonation, it might be time to ditch the caps and embrace the tap.
Yep, because kegerators aren't just about convenience. They improve beer quality, consistency, and presentation. And today we're going to break down why every home brewer should have one, how to build your own, and tips for keeping your system running perfectly.
But before we start drilling holes in old fridges and hooking up CO2 tanks, there's something we need to do first, because no keg system is complete without Beer 30.
In the craft beer system, the people are served by two but equally important groups: the brewers who make the beer and the bartenders who serve the pints. These are their stories, presented by Northwest Brewers Supply. You're handed a dusty bottle by a brewer with a tale as unique as the brew it holds. You never knew the challenges one man could face packaging his creation on a tailgate of a well-used Mazda pickup. Then you realize what awaits you at the bottom of the bottle is the essence of a man's journey. All started at Northwest Brewers Supply.
Welcome back to the Beercraft, folks. It is Beer 30, the best time of day on a Wednesday. Get to drink beer with a buddy today. I have got a big old bottle of beer in front of me.
I see that. What'd you bring, Ben?
It's called a growler. Maybe you've heard of these.
Growler.
It's 64 ounces of beer goodness. I stopped over at the Railroad Pub and Pizza and picked up 64 ounces of Bodhi's Zaffa. Yeah. My go-to IPA. Let's see. Ooh, a little bit of hissing. Well, that's all right.
A little bit of this and a little bit of
I
his.
can do this. Gonna let me pour again over expensive equipment. It's a brave soul.
Yep.
Little dribble here, little dribble there.
We have the here. Switch that coaster to Farm Strong so we don't ruin SVM.
Whoa! Clean up aisle 4.
You know what? You have to go.
Speaking of SVM,
We're gonna have to get
did you see the news today?
A beer towel. I do know some news.
Yeah, I caught wind of. New ownership is going to attempt to open back up, open Scatter Valley Malting up
Maybe
again
by
in the
April.
spring, April.
That sounds
March.
great.
Yeah, going to go forward with a smaller team, a smaller footprint, and
Does he have a team yet?
I'm not sure. The details were.
Did you talk to what's his name, Evan?
I didn't get to talk to anybody yet. I do want to reach out to Evan and have a conversation. But I did, it was on Scattered Breaking. Not Scattered Breaking. It was
News?
It was. Well, I saw it on Beer News, but I caught it on Scattered Valley Herald's Go Skagit website. Where somebody sent me a link.
Well, that's going to be a good success for the farmers.
It'll be interesting to see how things shake out. I'm excited to have that back in the valley, as you should be too. But today we're not drinking anything with Scattered Valley Malting. This is Seattle beer, Bodhi's Zaffa from Georgetown Brewing Company in Seattle. One of the two beers named, probably the only two beers in history that are named for the film Point Break. If you haven't seen that film, that's terrible of you. You should fix that. Point Break, Keanu Reeves and Patrick Swayze back in the day. Yeah.
I remember that show.
Fantastic film.
Great movie.
Great. It's like a cult classic film.
That makes me feel old now, thanks,
God,
man.
Right? Everything
Yeah,
makes me feel old now. Mornings especially.
Oh, I miss surfing.
Yeah, Johnny Utah. And
I used to only surf on my belly, though.
Body surfing. I would fall on my face a lot. But this is my go-to. This is my go-to IPA.
This is great.
I love this beer.
I do too. When I go out to the bar, I'll get the Bodhi.
It's an easy choice, a safe choice.
It's
the choice of a new generation.
It's one like the juicy style, kind of.
But I think
it's not too bitter.
I think it came out before kind of the haze craze.
Yeah, it's kind of like the haze. The haze.
But
because it's a very hazy beer.
It's opaque. It's slightly opaque.
Yeah.
It is not crystal clear. That's for sure.
And it's
really fantastic beer. I've actually got a clone recipe for this one at the shop. Maybe I should share that one in the show notes for those who want to try to make it. It's pretty good.
That'll be good.
I'm told they do have a proprietary yeast that they use for their house strain, but Wyeast 1098 is pretty darn close. The English ale or British ale, I think they call it.
It's a British ale.
Yeah. Pretty good. Post Bodhi.
So that would be a Safe Ale 04-ish.
Probably do the trick too. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Little flaked oats in there. That's gonna give it that. That's what gives it that soft kind of soft mouthfeel.
It is good. It's got some body to it.
Mm-hmm. I brewed it. I brewed it. It was pretty darn close. I couldn't. You can't clone everything perfectly. That's nigh on impossible. But I got pretty close, and I made a beer that I drank all 5 gallons of rapidly. And so did some other people. Very cool beer. Definitely a Seattle-centric brew house. They do have some distribution, but they are far more concerned with selling all of their beer in their local market.
Yeah. Now they had another one. They have another one, Lucille.
Lucille.
That's
is
like
a
fantastic
West
IPA. Coast IPA.
Yeah, that's a very good beer as well. I got a recipe for that one too.
I used to go to I started with Manny's. I mean, long time ago. If anybody knows Georgetown, it was Manny's was just the most popular.
Oh yeah.
And then they started getting other ones, and then
Johnny Utah came out.
Yeah, Johnny
Utah. That was a very good beer.
And then I went to if I'd see Lucille anywhere, I'd drink Lucille rather than Manny's. Yeah. And now it's Bodhi's off. If I see that anywhere, I'm like, that's my go-to beer.
My favorite color is orange, so I gravitate towards that.
Yeah, I had a Silver City Tropic Haze.
That's a good beer.
Yesterday.
That's a good beer.
It was, but I was disappointed because, unfortunately, it was probably the end of the keg, so it was a bit flat. Yeah.
So Manny Chow, I'm probably butchering your names, and I apologize. Come on the show, and I'll make it up to you. Is one of the co-founders at Georgetown, was previously an employee at the Mac and Jack's Brewery.
Okay.
So cut his teeth out there. Another, Seattle standard. For you, it was interesting. For years, you couldn't get if you wanted Mac and Jack at home, you either bought a keg from the brewery, or you built it, or you brewed it yourself.
Yeah,
that's probably one of the most popular clone recipes out there. Is the Mac and Jack African Amber. I sell a ton of that beer.
Yeah, I took that recipe and mottoed it.
Yeah, how would you do it?
Oh, I can't remember what the base recipe was. I probably just put a little more
10 pounds, 2 different
crystal malts were a little different.
We do. It's like 11 pounds of Maris Otter, a pound of Munich. I think it's got a little bit of Crystal 80 in there.
Crystal, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's it for grains.
I think I had 2 different crystal, or it was high, like 80 or 120.
Yeah. Yep. Get in that amber spectrum on there. Yeah.
It was good.
Yeah, malt forward beer.
And I got into it because I didn't really drink any amber beers. I was drinking IPAs and stouts and light beers. And my buddy John, he's like, hey, I want to drink this at home. He's like, can I come over and brew? And then I'll buy it and we'll brew it. And then I'll take 1.5 and you can have 1.5 gallon.
Score.
I'm like, yeah, every day.
Free beer. That always tastes better.
We did that every 2 weeks for a long time.
That's a good beer, bro, right there.
Yeah. And we also did. We made other beers too.
I can't drink Mac and Jacks anymore. One fateful July 7th, I went to a bar with some friends and was like, let's get some beers. This place is Maybe it's got air conditioning. It didn't. So we got a pitcher. Remember buying beer? Must be this old to remember buying beer in pitchers. But we got a pitcher of Mac and Jack.
Sports keg.
Sports keg. And nobody drank anything. Like I started pouring a pint, and nobody else
drank
did
it all.
anything. I drank that entire pitcher. Y'all, that's 64 ounces where I come from. And then some other friends came.
Throw it.
And we decided we'd get another round.
Oh my!
Well, that was wasted at that point. And guess who drank that one?
You.
Yeah, did too.
Yep. And
Yeah.
Mac and Jack's has a distinctive flavor character.
That was a bad evening. I mean, it's 90 degrees.
Now you can't. Now you
town,
can't.
like,
You can't stand it.
can't sleep, and it's like 80 degrees in the night. Like I can't. It was bad. It was bad. I think I ended up buying a new mattress. That's like it's bad. It was bad. Like sweat through the whole thing. Very very hot day. Unseasonably warm for Western Washington.
Yeah, that is tough when
And
it's
I can't
hot
drink
here
it.
like
I
that.
can't drink it anymore. That was like too many bad men. Like my liver says, "Fuck you, dude."
That's like, gosh, one of those liquors you drink when you're young.
Black Velvet.
Yukon Jack.
Oh, that
or
stuff's terrible.
Southern Comfort.
Do you know Black Velvet will curdle Bud Light? Like you pour them together. Like in my stomach, they do.
Wow.
Like it's bad.
I like beer and whiskey all the time,
Yeah.
but the Black Velvet might not be a whiskey.
Yeah. Full tank of
I don't know what
a
it
full
would
tank
be.
of Bud Light and a shot of Black Velvet makes it come all the way to here.
Ugh.
Another shot, it's out.
It boils up.
Oh boy, it's a bad reaction. I don't recommend it. Not the kind of show we want to do here on the podcast, but just reminiscing about fateful experiences.
Maybe we need to have a hangover show soon.
I got a hangover killer, which means we'll have to do it.
Remedy
We'll have
show.
to do a get a hangover show in order to do a hangover show.
That'd be
How do you like
hilarious.
that, guys? Do we don't do that? Let's watch us drink ourselves into oblivion. What could go right?
Yeah, what could go right? Okay, we'd first have to pre-funk,
Right.
Because there's no way we can drink that much beer in 1 hour to get a hangover.
I mean, if you believe in yourself. But yeah, that's a tall order. So we'll start with whiskey. That'll be great. This is quality.
Oh my
entertainment.
gosh.
You're gonna love it.
Yes. You want to see us face down in the waste can right over there?
I don't think they do, but if you do, we'll give it to you. It's fine. It's fine.
Bottle in an hour.
What could go right? Oh, that sounds like a rough show. I do have insurance again, so that'll be fine.
That's good. Yeah, I've got some insurance finally.
Yeah. There you go.
Yep.
Oh man, we got to drink some more of those Bodies off it. We have a whole half growler to add to my collection. I think I have too many of these darn things.
So do I. About 3 of the railroad ones.
Mm-hmm.
But I do have a lot of miscellaneous growlers from other breweries all around.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, as far as St. Louis.
Oh, very cool. I've got
St.
some
Louis,
from
Spokane.
Virginia that I flew home with.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I don't know if I have one from Texas.
Road trip.
Yeah. They probably don't do them in Texas.
Not everybody does.
No.
I was in. We were in Reno, and I can't remember if I was on the California side or. I think I was on the California side, and I was very excited because they had Russian River Pliny the Elder on tap. I went to that restaurant a couple times, and they would not sell growlers to go. That was not a thing.
Was it state law?
I'm not sure.
State
It
law.
was
Maybe a county law.
Yeah, could have been.
Yep.
Could have been. Silly town, Reno.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there's places where you go, and they I think here, at the Shell station, at the
You can get a
Shell-
growler at the Shell station.
Yeah, you get the growler at the Shell station at Cook Road, and they have to put black tape around the cap.
Oh, sure. That's your tamper evidence seal.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
And then there's places you can go like Hood River, Oregon, where you can buy a growler in the 64-ounce tap house, which I highly recommend. And then as soon as you walk outside, crossing the threshold, you can drink it.
you can take it to go.
You can take a growler to go, and now you've got 64 ounces of walking around beers.
Now you like jug drinking, got the jug kicked up on your shoulder.
It's easier. The first pour out of a growler is always the worst pour.
Mm-hmm.
Your equipment's going to.
Yeah, they have a nice park over there too.
It's a gorgeous.
Well, I mean, that's what they do.
I love
surfing.
Yeah. It's and absolutely, like, I see why. It's windy.
Yeah.
It's very windy.
You need to go back.
But you got frame out there. You've got full cell brewing out there.
You know what? We've talked about doing like on location casts.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, why would we even consider like going down the street? Why don't we go to Hood River?
It'd be better. Yeah, I'm down.
Yes.
Let's pencil me in for next Tuesday.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, we could do a special weekend
Yeah.
edition. You know, hey, we're at the.
How'd you guys like that? Do a road trip.
I'd love that.
Go drinking. You can go drink remotely with us.
Yep,
in,
he said
Hood
he
River.
said he loved it.
You heard that? Okay,
Yep,
cool,
yep.
cool.
Oh, so did he?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
Oh,
that guy over there. Oh,
Yep.
the guy with the guy with the hair in the back.
I see it.
Yeah. Well, that's gonna, I think, be a wrap for Beer 30 today. But we've got everything you wanted to know and 12 things you probably didn't want to know about kegging and kegerators and how to build your own and why it's cool and why you should do it. And
Right.
we're
Give
gonna,
me a little bit of an experience.
We're going to
talk.
unpack the whole program
I built a few.
right here on the Beer Craft just as soon as we come back from a wee little break from our sponsor, Northwest Brewer Supply.
Oh, yeah, we love them.
Ooh, I do too. I'm a big fan.
I bet.
Big fan. I'm biased, but that doesn't make me wrong. So stick around when we come back. We're talking kegerators right here on the Beer Craft.
In the home brewing system, beer, wine, cider, and mead are made by brewers. These are their stories presented by Northwest Brewers Supply. Mazda Man asked if he wanted water. Mazda Man knows that drinking 8 glasses of water is harder than chugging 8 beers. He also knows that beer is mostly water, hence chugging 8 beers is like drinking 8 glasses of water. And the only place to get more water is Northwest Brewers Supply.
Welcome back to the Beer Craft, and we are talking all things kegging today. Number 1 on the list, Ben, why kegging is better than bottling. Let's face it.
Why is it? Why is it better?
Well, bottling, it's a chore. But
We've all bottled because we've all had to bottle up to this point, right?
You got to pay your dues.
Yeah.
Ninkasi demands a little work there.
You know, I used to go get these 20-ounce Sapporo bottles from the sushi store.
Oh, yeah.
I used to give them for free in a case. I mean, I get 9 of them in a case. It was great. I still have 30 boxes of them in my attic.
And they're probably empty, too.
They are,
You didn't have any beer in them. That's terrible. But kegging is better than bottling because it's 207 less things to do.
Are you sure?
I did the math.
Counted
if you
them.
Clean it and sanitize it and fill it and cap it times 52 bottles.
Yep, there
That's
you go.
207 steps to get through that 5 gallons of beer. But kegging,
No scrubbing.
If you're doing it right,
Well-
you shouldn't have to scrub. You shouldn't have to scrub your bottles either if you're doing it right. But cleaning them, you have to do. You still got to clean it. You got to sanitize it. You got to fill it, and you got to put a lid on it.
Yep.
And then you're done. It's 4 things, 4 steps. It's easy. You can do it. I have faith in you.
I did it. And I had this huge bin of water with star sand
Oh yeah.
that I'd go in and I think I'd put them in the dishwasher and then put them on the bottle tree and then put them down in the huge container of star sand.
Well, make an assembly line process out
I'm
of
ready
bottling.
ready to
Spend a
bottle.
day. Kegging robs you of a brew day.
Kegging.
Or bottling.
Bottling
Excuse me.
robs,
Reverse that. Bottling robs you of a brew day. That was my rewind sound effect.
How'd you like the rewind?
Yeah. Yeah. it's great.
No, how'd you like the rewind last episode?
Did we do a rewind last episode?
Did you listen to that episode?
I
yet?
listened to the episode. I might have missed a rewind. Oh, the bit at the end. Is that what you're calling the rewind?
Remember, it went like.
Nope, don't remember
Like,
that.
hey.
No. Anyways.
And I came on and told everybody that I thought that it was a special 2 beer 30s.
Oh yeah. I don't remember the rewind line. Okay.
Yeah.
If you haven't,
for the Kolsch
listened to the
episode,
Kolsch episode, which
the last
should
episode.
be by the time you hear this, it'll have been posted.
Yeah.
I missed the I'll go home and listen to it again.
It was funny. I was waiting for some feedback from you.
I'm sorry.
And I never got it.
I get distracted easily by shiny objects.
I know. That's all right. That's all right. So
let's B-roll a big chunk of that.
Faster carbonating. Carbonation.
Yeah. It's 5 to 7 days.
Easier serving.
Yep.
You can pour it.
Consistent carbonation levels.
Consistent.
Dial it in.
And way easier than trying to get that consistency of that carbonation in the bottles. And if you do overcarbonate, you can correct.
You can. It's still a pain in the butt, so you don't have to do that. We're going to talk about that later on in the show. But there's something about, flexing on your friends when they see your home draft setup.
When you walk into a garage,
and there's a kegerator in there. It's party time. It's
and that's cool. And then, and then you have something to talk about. It's maybe even a cool
It's usually what do you got on tap?
Yeah,
you can at least talk about that.
Look at that thing.
Yeah. So kegerator in your garage. If you have a man cave that doesn't have a kegerator in it, can you actually call that a man cave? I think that's man law. I think it's a violation of man law 47.
Yep.
Burt Reynolds, Hulk Hogan, they all sat around. Remember the Miller Lite commercials? Man law number 4, no fruit and beer or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm sure they eventually got into man caves and kegerate without
man
kegerators.
caves and kegerators.
Must have a kegerator in your man cave.
You must. It costs you money. It costs a little bit of money.
You can buy happiness. I'm telling you. It does cost money, so that is one of the downsides. You do have a higher upfront cost compared to bottling.
It's convenience, though. I think my time is worth it.
Yeah. I mentioned it robs you of a brew day. Bottling robs you of a brew day. If you sit through and bottle 5 gallons of beer and I ask you to fire up your kettle again, you're saying, no way, I'm going to bed.
A refrigerator for 1 month will cost you $10.
That's cheap.
Saving that time for $10.
It's cheap.
Yes.
It's cheap.
Love it.
It does require some CO2 management.
This sucks.
It's not a function of if you get a leak, it's when. Like riding a motorcycle. It's not if you fall, but when you fall. Right.
And now you you have to babysit it because you don't want to get surprised.
Well, good maintenance practices. We're going to talk about that. Yeah. Will set you free. But you got to remember, even brand new setups can leak because everything shrinks in the cold. That is, I build them, I send them out there, and sometimes leaks happen. Leaks just happen. You're just going to have to deal with it.
There's been times when I had my CO2 hooked up and I'm doing something, and I'll go and I'll turn off my tank.
Sure.
And I'll let everything kind of equalize and let it sit for a while.
Yeah, it's at least a fail-safe.
Yep.
They do take up some space, especially if your spouse or your roommate isn't thrilled about giving up more space to your brew house.
Or the garage.
But all you gotta do is make more beer. That'll care. I had to wait to get mine. I had to wait quite a while. I had to wait for my spouse my wife to say, we need a new refrigerator. And then I got a kegerator.
Yeah.
I got to keep the old one. And I still got it. I still got that kegerator. It's still running just fine.
Perfect.
What about you? What was your first kegerator?
My first kegerator was a deep freeze.
Keyser build.
Yep. Just a nice one. It was 5 feet long. I think it was 5 or 6. Maybe it was a 6-footer.
Hold some kegs in there.
Yep. I held 9 kegs.
That's a good start.
9 5-gallon kegs. And I had 6 taps on it.
Got to have room for more for the other beers, right?
Well, if I could fit nine kegs in there, yeah.
That's it.
I don't know why I didn't have 9 taps.
Well, you got to think about your production timeline. You got to have room. You got beers you're drinking and beers you're carbonating.
Right.
Right.
Beers I'm carbonating. Beers
all the steps in the production.
Letting them age a bit.
Maturing. So what do you need to build a kegerator for yourself? Well, the essentials list. You're going to need you're going to need a cold source, a fridge or a chest freezer. That might be a standard upright,
Yep. You can do a standard upright refrigerator.
Yep, just a regular old refrigerator, or a chest freezer.
Yep. Or a short refrigerator. I mean,
Short
like
refrigerator.
with
Mini
the
fridges work
kegerator,
too.
like the one you'd buy off the internet. Yeah.
Mini
Mini
fridges.
fridge, okay.
There's a couple of things we'll talk about in mini fridges as we get going on here, but chest freezers, mini fridges. A buddy of mine, we have a glass door commercial refrigerator is our kegerator at the shop.
You can find those on the marketplace or somewhere.
Yep, score those for cheap. A buddy of mine did an ice box, classic, turn of the century ice box, just an insulated box for his beer, and he had a separate chamber that held a block of ice, and it just had fans that would blow cold air over his beer. That thing worked for years until a faulty wiring setup scorched and melted some insulation and nearly caught the house on fire. But,
oh no!
That's not the kegerator.
Are we using like milk jugs frozen? Then you just kind of like
probably could.
Yeah,
you probably could.
Put a milk jug in the freezer.
Just recycle it in and out of the refrigerator.
2, 3, and bam.
I mean, this is what your great grandparents did before commercial refrigeration. It was the ice box was literally a box with an ice compartment in it.
Yep.
You put a block of ice in there.
Yep. Like when we're fermenting, we put a towel over the carboy or the bucket, put a fan on it to cool the whole thing down. Kind of the same.
Just a heat exchanger.
Yeah.
So
physics.
You're also going to need a CO2 tank and a regulator. I recommend, this is my professional recommendation, a 5-pound CO2 tank. And the reason is 10 pounders and 20 pounders.
Oh yeah,
they
difficult.
Empty just as fast and they cost twice to 4 times as much. So when you get a leak, you're going to be out a lot more gas.
Yep. And then you also have a better chance of the exchange when you go to the homebrew store.
A little easier, yeah. If they're not stocking 10 and 20 pounders. The 10 and 20 pounders are heavy.
They're 5-pounder?
Yeah, 5 pounders. They're about knee high.
Yep. Aluminum.
Yeah, aluminum.
Nice looking.
Easy stuff.
Easy to work
if
with.
you're worried about running out of gas, I say get a second tank. And then if you run out, you just put the new one on and you're down the road. And you bring that one to get it swapped out. And you never have to worry about running out because you've got 2.
Yeah, is CO2 really that important that if you find it at 8 o'clock at night and you have a leak and you stop your leak or you've
well, it depends. Are you still drinking at 8 o'clock at night and you're out of gas, or is the middle of the party when you run out of gas?
Oh, there we go.
Or you're in the middle of carbonating, and that's usually the one that nails us. If we're forced carbonating. And we run out of gas midway through there. That sucks. Don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So, pro tip: get a second tank. This is the way. You're gonna need kegs. These are Corny kegs or Cornelius style kegs. These come to us from the soda, the old soda industry back in the 80s, 70s, and 80s. They would ship 5 gallons of soda to their retail locations, and they'd hook them up on their draft systems. At some point, they figured out they would just ship the syrup to the grocery store, and that was cheaper because shipping liquids kind of sucks. And so there's a glut of these reconditioned Cornelius kegs. They're 5 gallons, and they work for home brewers. They're easy to clean. They're easy to maintain. Sandkey kegs, the commercial Sandkey kegs.
Sankeys. I love Sankeys.
They're fantastic.
I would recommend Sankeys.
They are...
the decoupler, they need a
special
decoupler.
Special coupler.
But they work great.
It's also harder to clean.
You
have to disassemble that keg to do it.
You need a keg cleaner.
Yeah.
And you can...
There are not fantastic options for verifying the cleanliness of your corny keg.
Okay, if you have...
I'm going to argue on that point.
I'll argue all day long.
Yeah.
Because I ran a brewery, and I used my keg cleaner that I made, and I had all Sankey caps. I Sankey kegs with my decouplers, and we can have an episode on this because I can show it. I think it's kind of an important thing to have.
Yeah.
It's a really cool little rig to have. I just made it out of L angle, and it was all. I bolted it together.
Oh, like
L
the channel track stuff.
It had all the holes in it. Yep. I just cut it to length and put it up, and I made it like a small.
So you had a pump running cleaning solution, your rinse water and sanitizer through there.
I have.
We're using the color adaptive cleaners to that are reactive to the soils. No,
we were in Mexico.
You couldn't. You had a very small opening that you did not disassemble to clean. I'm guessing. So you just hooked a coupler up to that, and that
put my coupler up.
So the problems in those is you can't visually see that you've done that job.
Right.
You've gotten all this stuff out.
So what do we do for so long, all these professional breweries?
Well, those professional brewers use some hardware, and a lot of their cleaning solutions are reactive to the compounds that are present.
Exactly.
And then
that's
they
what I
also
use,
have
though.
rinse agents that are reactive to the cleaning agents to make sure that you've rinsed it appropriately, and then your sanitizing solution does those jobs. And those are not available in homebrew sizes.
No, they're not.
They're spendy hardware, and that's why I say just get corny kegs, man. Like, it's cheap and it's easy.
I can show you how to build it for cheap.
We will talk about that in the very near future, and I look forward to that show.
If you don't like it, if you don't think it can be done, you just ask Andrew, and I will show you. Because we used to, how many kegs did I have? I had like 7.
Oh, you had a bunch of them.
I had 17 kegs. Yeah. Oh, I didn't have any of those kegs when I was here.
No.
I mean, I think I accumulated them along the way down in San Diego, down in Mexico, because I had 10 homebrew kegs that I brought with me. And where are they? They're out on the side of the house, never used, because I had the Sankeys. Yeah. And I built my keg washer. So
as long as it was, as long as it got it clean.
Yeah, because I had the 3-vessel brew system.
Right.
So I had a 3-vessel cleaning system.
Sure.
As well.
Yeah, you would need to be able to clean it, rinse it, and sanitize it.
It's rinse. No, it's soap. It's the cleaner, then the rinser,
and the sanitizer. Did I say that? I said it. I think I said that. We're gonna take it to playback, and you guys are gonna tell me I'm right. It's fine.
Oh, he said it.
You're also gonna need kegs,
and they all need to be heated up to the right temperature and all that.
It's probably gonna be corny kegs.
I know. Get corny kegs. Well, okay. So if you have corny kegs, how do we clean them?
Well,
are
visually,
we gonna get into that in a minute? Or?
So cleaning let's take a tour. Cleaning kegs is just like cleaning up bottles. You're gonna add your cleaning solution. Now, you can fully disassemble your keg, clean the parts individually, PBW on the inside and rinse it out. You can visually see that it's clean. You can visually inspect all the components, reassemble. Oftentimes I use a keg cleaner that pushes up through my hardware. I can visually see that it's clean.
CIP style?
Kind of a CIP system for homebrew kegs. It's got ball lock attachments.
Okay, now we were just talking about this little orifice.
But I can see, but I can see what I can see my stuff.
It's not even heated up.
I can see my stuff. I use hot PBW.
Yeah, okay.
You're making assumptions, sir. Anyways, our first on-air argument. This is great.
You know what I'll do? You know what I used to do? You sell them, don't you? The big keg brush.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. On a drill.
Yep. Yeah, just zip it around there. I like cornies because you can visually inspect them.
Yes.
If you want to be really, really thorough, disassemble the show, put it back together, put it back together.
To be honest, the only reason that I used that keg brush was because I wanted them disassembled every single time. Mm-hmm. Because I think I ran into a sanitation problem early on in the kegging. My kegging journey.
Sure.
And from that point on, I'm like, this doesn't work.
Those are called tuition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then I knew I disassemble everything, use my brush, boom, boom, boom.
I have also used my PBW, and I've filled it with PBW, let it soak and clean, do its job, and I've pressurized the keg to use CO2 to push it through the rest of the hardware.
There you go.
I do recommend periodically doing a full disassembly and clean and replace.
Tape the dip tube
out.
out.
Yeah, and
I always did the dip tube because I had a little tiny brush for that.
Yeah.
Every single time, because that's one of the biggest build-up.
So, back to the essentials.
Back to building this dang thing.
What you need kegs. You're also going to need you might need some shanks, taps, and tubing. You're definitely need some hoses. If you're not doing faucets through the door or something, you can get by with a picnic faucet and your hoses. The connectors for your kegs are going to go in there with that. If you're building a keezer, you're going to need a temperature controller because frozen beer, not so great.
Right. You're going to start with a chest freezer.
Yeah, but you gotta. So it's a secondary thermostat to keep that at refrigeration temperature instead of freezer temperature.
They have a couple different types. There's an Inkbird that's pretty cheap. Yeah. You can make one with a little strawberry pie.
Yeah.
And
There's not much to it. Basically, it's just cutting the power
at the temperature.
It's reading the temperature and cutting the power at the right moment.
Right.
It's a secondary thermostat.
My freezer lasted, oh my gosh, 10, 15, 12 years.
Yeah.
12, 13, 14
They're
years.
fine.
Yeah.
So you're going to need one of those for a Keys. We're going to Keyser. If you're running multiple kegs, I do recommend a gas manifold to split your gas supply. And you're going to want one with check valves on it, not just Y fittings or T fittings.
You need
and we'll explain why that is later on in the show when we talk about troubleshooting.
You want a T valve and you want a check fitting down near the keg.
Near the keg is better, but if all you have is it on your manifold, that's better than nothing. And most of the manifolds on the market, those valves have a one-way check in there. Yeah. And that makes it easy. Yeah.
So to touch, you own the shop. I
got all the goodies. Optional upgrades may include a digital temp controller for your refrigerator if you want your kegerator to run at 55 degrees, which is the cask ale serving temperature. You're going to need a secondary thermostat for that on any refrigerator. You might go for upgraded faucets like Perlec, Intertap, NukaTap. Some of these are known as forward sealing, and they don't stick. They never dry out and stick, and we'll talk about that in the troubleshooting guide. Custom tap handles would be cool. That might be cool, something you want to do. Something, if you got a lathe or a buddy's got a lathe or a dad who's got a lathe, it can turn out some cool looking stuff.
Or a mold with a, for like epoxy.
Sure. Do any kind of cool thing. They make little
3D printing.
They make little tap handle inserts, and it's just a threaded insert.
Yep.
It's threaded for a tap handle on the inside, and on the outside it's just a thick for drilling it, screwing into material. And that could be 3D printed, or it could be wood or clay or something, whatever you're working with.
Yeah.
Some of those branded tap handles that you see at the bar, those could be cool, but you gotta watch out. Those are usually considered stolen property. They are the property of the brewery. They're in fact illegal to sell.
They cost money.
They cost a lot of money to make. You're talking like $75 to $150 per handle.
That takes away from the profit of what they're giving
of your favorite
beer.
brewery. Yeah. I've seen some at garage sales, and they were gifted some. And
I have a couple.
Yeah, we all do.
Miller Lite, I think. One like that.
I'll gladly take their profits. It'll be fine. Some of your other upgrades might be beer gas options for like your nitro stout or something like that. One of the ones you might see on the marketplace is called Guinness gas, and this is like a 25 to 70% or 25-75 ratio of CO2 to nitrogen. You got to watch out for some of those ones. The Guinness gas in particular, that blend, if you just stick your favorite carbonated stout on that blend, that beer is going to go flat because there's not enough carbon dioxide in that mix to maintain the CO2 level that you want. Even in say a cask ale,
carbonation.
it's just your beer is just going to go flat. So if you wanted to do like a nitro pour setup, I would go with maybe a 30-70 or a 35-65 blend. It's got a little bit more CO2 to maintain the small amount of carbonation in there.
When I come into the shop, do you have those two different levels?
I don't carry them full time, but Central Welding has them, and I can get them. The local one here in Burlington carries several different mixes that are available.
Okay.
So
is it pre-order then?
Pre-order is easy. A phone call, and I can get it the next day. Easy that day even. If I'm not alone in the shop. Those blends, if you're doing like a nitro pour or cask pour, those will be easy. Those are nice. You uses the same gas bottle, so the same regulator that you already have, so you could do it part-time without breaking the bank. For a one-off, say nitro St. Patty's, you just get a tank of that.
Nice.
It'd be kind of cool. So how to build a kegerator. So here's our building guide. First, you got to find a fridge or freezer. There are a couple of things you want to watch out for. Sizing considerations. The first one is how many kegs do you want? Andrew, you mentioned you had nine kegs in there,
6,
which is a ton. My kegerator at home has room for 5 kegs. I could just fit 5 kegs in there. I think there's kind of an ideal number for a lot of home brewers, and it's 3 faucet, 3 different flavors. So a tower with 3 faucets on it, or 3 faucets through the door, with room for at least 4 kegs. That gives us 3 flavors to drink on, and we've always got one that's carbonating or maturing. I try to think about my production line. I've got the beer I'm dreaming about, the beer I just brewed, the last beer I made, the beer that I just kegged, and the ones I'm drinking on. So I want to make sure there's room.
That's a nice production.
Yeah, it's great. And if I can keep all those slots full, I don't run out of beer. So 4 is great. 3 taps and room for the next batch is fantastic. So if you're going the mini fridge route, there's a couple things you got to watch out for. One, you're going to need 29 inches interior height. Yeah, and not all mini fridges are as mini as the other ones. There are some very mini ones.
You can find ball lock kegs that are shorter.
There are some, yep.
I mean, pin lock.
Pin lock are shorter. There is some new ball locks that are a little fatter but shorter, and they actually fit with hardware inside a Keezer without a collar. We're talking about that in a minute. But in a mini fridge, you're going to need at least 29 inches of interior space for your keg and your hardware. You are going to watch out for a freezer tray. Sometimes those mini fridges have that little itty bitty cutout where you can, put your frozen, your hot pockets in or something. Because they're like 2 inches tall. Hot pocket. So you got to watch out for those.
Was that just an advertisement?
Those little.
I'll go work on some money for that.
You got to watch out for those. You got to watch out for those freezers.
You up right there.
You got to watch out for those freezers. The bottom shelf of that freezer is in fact the heat exchanger, so you can't bend that out of the way or move it, because if you pierce it or bend it and put a hole in it, you just built a new boat anchor.
Yep. It's not gonna be cold.
You shit the bed. So don't do that. Now for an
you're gonna need a tower.
You may. Yep.
Unless you do a picnic tap, I guess.
Picnic faucet, or you could go through the door on a mini fridge too, but then you got to bend over it.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Tower systems, on mini fridges are probably the most popular.
In my man cave, I got to have my tower on.
We're going to talk about how to drill through a kegerator or a refrigerator here in a minute. So those rules will apply if you're installing a tower on your setup.
Really be careful.
You're going to watch out, and we're going to talk about that. On an upright refrigerator, kind of your standard, apartment size refrigerator, that was the first one I had. It wasn't very big, maybe like a 15 cubic foot. The biggest thing you can do for those is when you open you're going to take all the shelves out because you're going to put kegs in there. But you can you want to raise the floor height, because if you look at there right now, often like where the crisper drawer is on a refrigerator, if you pull it out,
that's where the compressor is.
Yeah, it's shallower than the full depth because there's a compressor hub, like the transmission hump in the backseat of your car. Right, it's just room. They got to make room for it. So if we raise the floor height up and above that compressor hump, now we get the full depth of the keg. So I talked about mine was not very big, maybe 16 cubic foot, kind of little refrigerator. It holds 5 kegs and the gas bottle inside with the shelf.
How do you build a shelf?
Depends on your model. Some I've seen some builds where they had like a shelf bracket, so somebody was able to just put 2 legs on a board on the bracket and they were fine.
Some screws.
Yeah,
on the side,
mine I had to build
stuff.
A platform to the right height with 4 legs on it.
I think a platform would be best.
And that's easy.
4x4s with a little.
Your measurement, less your platform thickness. Bolt those to it and just slide them in there.
And then paint it.
I didn't paint it. I was lazy.
You have to paint it.
Nobody looks at it. I don't care.
It gets mildew, it gets moldy, and it gets gross, and you're going to have to do it again. So paint it, and you won't have
Mine's
that
like
problem.
12 years old, and I haven't had to replace it. So
I guess if it's always cold.
Yeah, it's always cold.
It's always cold.
So I got my notes here, and I got to find it. Build a shelf. Gotcha.
Yep, build a shelf.
Freezer conversions. We talked about Keezers. So a chest freezer. Often, if you're just doing standard height corny kegs, or you're building a kegerator for commercial kegs, which is totally option 2. For those of you non-home brewers out there who want to get on the action, you can build this for a commercial keg. With a chest freezer, they are often too shallow. They're not they don't have enough depth in there.
Yes.
So you have to unbolt the lid and you build a 2x6 or 2x4 collar.
You take the lid off with the hinges.
Yeah,
You take
leave the hinges attached to the lid.
Yes.
Yeah, that's important.
Yep.
And you put a 2x6 collar on it. Just screw that thing together, and make that to the same size as the dimensions of your
And they have seals.
keezer.
They have seals at Home Depot that are small.
Yeah,
Threshold
peel and
seals or
stick.
whatever. Yep.
Peel and stick foam
Peel and
around
stick.
that, and you're just done.
I even used like this little, like it's moldable. It's almost like clay.
Oh yeah,
It's
yeah.
like clay. It's like
Yeah.
a strip of clay.
I mean,
and
if
you
you
just
look
kinda
at
mold
the
it.
if you look at the seal on your refrigerator or freezer, it's not a robust seal, but it does the job.
It
and
has
who cares?
magnets in there. Really.
They got magnets, but the material itself is not super robust.
No.
Like peel and stick foam, gravity does the rest of the
Accordion.
work. You're fine.
Yeah.
You're fine. And that's just going to raise the height of your keezer. You can drill holes through that collar
Yep.
for your
Make the
your
wood.
hardware.
It's a 2x6.
Yep.
So you got 6 inches to drill a, what is it, like a 3/4 inch hole, 1 inch hole.
It's a 1 inch hole for a shank. Yeah.
Shanks go through there and
Done and done.
boom.
We talked about it. You need a temperature controller because the default position on your chest freezer is 32 or below.
Yep.
And it wants to go there real bad. You can't do anything about this. You put a secondary thermostat on there that just cuts the power at say 50 degrees or 48 or 34 degrees. I don't know what you're doing. You keep moving.
Oh,
Edit that shit out.
no. That's hilarious.
Tried to pour and he's moving his fucking glass
pouring
all
a
over the
beer.
place. I'm just pouring beer over expensive equipment. He's moving his
right.
glass over
That's
here.
all right.
Yeah. Temperature control. We talked about that.
Beer 45 right there.
What about good deals on refrigerators? You know of any good deals?
Oh, hold on.
refrigerators?
Speaking about good deals on refrigerators,
I just did.
if you decide to do a refrigerator, upright fridge as your kegerator, you build your shelf. You got your 4 kegs in there, tap handle on the. We're going to talk about it whether at the other side or the door. Door is better always. But then you can use your freezer above as a normal freezer space. Hops do very well in that space.
You should be storing your hops in the freezer.
Yes. Other things, popsicles.
Just don't put your
beer ice cream.
Just don't put your beer glasses in there. Do not freeze your beer glasses.
Yeah, no.
I don't know who started this trend, but every bar does it.
Frosty
And they're all-
cloud,
and
frosty mug.
And it's bad for your beer, and I'll tell you about it why later. But just put it in your brain right now. Don't do that. Don't do that.
Don't do that.
Good deals on a refrigerator.
Yeah.
I've gotten some mileage out of the free one on the corner.
Sidewalk.
Yeah, the
refrigerators?
sidewalk refrigerator says.
Well, we all upgrade. We
Right?
we get a new fridge. We take it out of the kitchen. We put it in the
garage.
We take the one from the garage and we put it on the street.
And it becomes somebody else's new kegger.
Bam. And,
Yeah.
Yep.
Even the one that's set with the sign on it that says the freezer don't work, but it still gets cold. That one's a good price. It's only going to cost you $25 in a couple months when it does shit the bed to take it to the dump. But it's a starter. It's a good place to start.
Yeah.
And
if you screw that one up, what does it matter?
your various marketplaces will
Okay,
have
don't
good
be
deals.
like drilling through the side though.
You got to be careful. And we're going to talk about what it takes to drill. Drilling.
You have a drilling guide in here?
It's actually the funny thing. It's the next subject. Good segue. Good segue.
All right.
So drilling through for your taps or not. And this is going to be applied for if you're adding a tower to your mini fridge or your keezer build. Is you got to be mindful when you start drilling through that. It's not like the olden days. Your modern appliances, they don't have like coolant lines running.
Like on the back of the unit.
The back of the unit there's a heat exchanger,
Right.
on a modern one. But on
They're
some
on
of
the
the old
side.
school ones, the walls actually had heat exchangers, and the shelves were heat exchangers, and they just pumped it through the whole show because those systems were very inefficient. Modern stuff, they just have the heat exchanger on the back and one in the freezer side, and then gravity.
The Freon goes through the walls.
Through the back side, and then through the heat exchanger that's in the freezer compartment. There's usually a plate. It's not a very big heat exchanger anymore. And usually the cold air from the freezer falls into the refrigerator,
So
and that's what
we can
regulates
drill holes
temperature
in
there.
there?
With one caveat.
I knew it.
You
I knew
don't,
there was
so they don't have
something.
coolant lines in there, but they do
something
put
coming up.
electrical component, like the electrical wires in there. And it's, if there's a switch on your door of your refrigerator, like the little light, maybe it's got a control panel on it on the door or something. You can almost trace a line from the power supply of your refrigerator all the way to the switch or the dial or the controller. And if that's if that straight line minimum distance, because they're trying to like not use as much wire as they can, so they're going the path of least resistance. They're going straight to the hardware.
The wire is going diagonal up the door.
It could do that, and so you want to be mindful of that.
Tap above any components.
Sure. What I do when I'm drilling through it, I'm going to drill in from the inside out. And I have a 1-inch hole saw, and I can actually take the mandrel, the drill bit in the center, the little guidepost drill bit. You can take that out and drill it with just the hole saw. But I start at sort of a 45-degree angle, so I start cutting a groove into the plastic from the interior. Because most of your refrigerators or freezers have a plastic shell on the inside and thin metal on the outside. Everything else is just foam in the middle. So I take my drill at 45-degree angles. I can get a groove, and that's going to help keep my drill in place while I'm doing it. And I'm going to drill slowly, and I'm just going to drill through the plastic. And before I even get all the way through, I'm going to stop, and I'll use a knife to get the rest of it out there. Once I get the plastic out of the way, I'm going to manually pick through the foam with, like a dental pick or something dumb. Screwdriver works fantastically for this.
Dental pick.
Yeah, if you have something cool, if you're bougie and extra.
You are. You're privileged.
But I want to excise all that foam, get all that foam out of there, and I'm looking for wires. If I if I find wires that don't push up out of the way, and even if they push out of the way, they will fall back down. So if I find wires, I just tape that hole again, and I find a new location. If I don't find any wires, I'm good to go. But you got to be real careful, because again, if you nick that wire, you've got a boat anchor now.
Yep.
Yeah, that's going to catch fire. That insulation will
anything else
around there. That's no bueno. So don't do that.
If you have a stand-up freezer that is 10 years old or more, you have the Freon lines running through the walls.
Yeah, and so for the so some of those older ones, you can you can actually test for that. If you plug in the freezer and let it get cold, go through a couple cycles and get all cold, then you can take a mixture of water and baking soda. You make a slurry with that, and then you can paint it on the wall that you want to drill through and let it go. And as it runs through a couple of cycles, the water will evaporate and the baking soda will kind of turn crusty. And it'll actually tell you, oh, there's a coolant line in here. Don't fuck with that one. Mm-hmm. And so you can, let the device tell you where it's at. That's kind of an old school trick.
Nice.
So if you're doing that, you're going to drill a 1-inch hole for your shanks and faucets. These are threaded. They're standard sizes. Wherever you find them, they're all going to be the same kind of, 1 inch.
Yep.
It's a 1-inch non-tapered thread. I can't remember the thread pitch because that's a whole different language I don't speak.
Probably 24.
Potentially. I don't know. But they're non-tapered gasketed connections.
Yeah, it's probably just MPT.
It is. It's 24. Not NPT. It's because that's a tapered fitting.
Is it?
This is beer pipe thread.
That's what
it's beer
There's
thread.
A couple of them.
In the U.S. it's beer thread. In the UK they have British beer thread.
I could have had this information in front of me.
Well, you knew what we were talking about.
Well, I usually have all this information in front of me on my computer.
Oh yeah. For the engineering side of your job.
Yeah.
So one of the other pieces of hardware, there is an optional gas bulkhead you can drill through to pour your gas into your keg to your manifold, leaving your gas bottle on the outside of the fridge. Well, this is kind of nice for like easy swap out. You don't have to open the fridge. You don't have to monkey around with the kegs because they're going to get moved around. And it's just right there, and you can kind of see what's going on.
If you have enough room in the kegerator, it's perfectly okay to leave it in there.
It doesn't matter. The performance of your kegerator will not be impacted by having the CO2 bottle inside with the beer, with one caveat. The temperature or the tank pressure gauge, and this would be the one opposite your gas tank. That gauge is calibrated for a tempered environment.
Yep.
So it's trying to read, gas, that it's equating the pressure in the tank to its volume.
You're gonna run out a
at
lot quicker than you
68
think.
degrees. Yeah, it's always going to be wrong.
Bam.
So when you get it cold, the pressure decreases. The tank gauge doesn't know about that scenario, and so it's giving you an incorrect reading. That gauge is also the one we break first, because usually if we kick over the gas bottle with the regulator on it, that's the first thing that hits the ground, shatters. It doesn't leak.
Then you're
it
like,
doesn't
it doesn't
work.
matter.
Well,
Whatever.
there's easy ways to figure exactly how much gas you have.
I don't need to know how much gas I have in my tank.
Yeah.
I just need to know what pressure it's at.
Sometimes you want to know, and it's easy. You just weigh the tank.
Just pick it up.
If you take it's actually on the bottle, the gas tank itself, there's a stamp on it. It's stamped into the metal.
Right. How much it weighs?
Yeah, and it's usually
Empty.
T and a number,
Tare
or
weight.
TW stands for tare weight.
Yeah.
That's the weight empty.
Empty, yeah.
Anything
Then you can
over that
calculate it.
number is CO2.
Right. So you can calculate how many
Yeah.
volumes you have
An
left.
aluminum tank averages 7.5 to 8 pounds. So anything over that is CO2. You put it on the scale and it's 11 pounds. Guess what? You got 3 pounds of gas. You're fine. 3-4 pounds. CO2, we'll talk about later too, but they're nominally filled to 4.5 pounds. So a 5-pound tank, it's like a 2x4. It's not 2 inches by 4 inches.
4.5.
So a
3.5.
5-pound tank is really 4.5 pounds of gas. We'll talk about that in a little bit. We are too. It's in here.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it's the next section. It's like
gosh.
part 5 of the next section.
Right. You really got us.
Tower versus
Really got us a good episode this week.
towers versus. It's
Really
a lot.
love
There's
it.
a lot of content here. Like I spent a good hour with someone just talking. Like, okay, I'm ready to build a kegerator. What do I got to do? And
Right.
I do all this information because
Here we go.
it's important, kids.
So we know.
and
And
I want
you know.
I want you to know, and I'm good at repeating myself. So congratulations. If you're going for the tower, you got to drill it the same way you're doing shanks. Sometimes you'll be able to do a threaded screw, machine screw to hold it steady. Sometimes you'll have to build some sort of, locking, like a ring on the bottom that you can screw into from the refrigerator. Because the refrigerator, it's a thin metal foam and then a piece of plastic. And there's not much meat in there to hold your tower up. Sometimes your mini fridge is designed for a tower, and it's already got kind of something there to screw into. Not all the time. I think we should probably take a little break. Is it about that time?
Take a break?
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it.
I'm going to fill some beer up here, and when we get back, we're going to talk about setting up your CO2 system. Because there's kind of a lot of information right there.
It's a big one.
It's a big one.
Well, it's important.
Yeah, it's making the show go. We got to make it's the make the beer go flow
It's
juice.
to make the beer flow juice.
Yeah, that's right.
CO2
Make it happen.
flow juice.
All right, I'm gonna fill up my beer because clearly I need one.
We are going to have a beer. Give love to our sponsor. We'll be right back.
Cheers.
In the craft beer system, the people are served by 2 equally important groups: the brewers who make the beer and the bartenders who serve the pints. These are their stories, presented by Northwest Brewers Supply. Mazda man, with his arms slung over a life-size cardboard cutout of his best friend who couldn't attend the festival for reasons, is drinking his blue ribbon beer surrounded by equally passionate enthusiasts and, of course, a new best friend. All thanks to Northwest Brewers Supply.
All right. Welcome back, folks. We are deep into the kegerator episode, and we got more. we got more for you.
We have more beer, too.
More beer. We refilled. You should too. Hopefully you did that already.
Is it gone? Is it gone?
The beer? No.
3/4?
Was what gone?
It's like a never-ending growler.
It is gone. It is.
Oh,
the
dang
growler
it.
is finally.
All right.
We did kill
It's
the
gone.
growler. Yeah.
It's gone.
So
we better get on with this.
we're gonna set up our CO2. You're gonna need some gas line. How much gas line? Well, this really is how much do you need?
A function of how far your bottle is away from your keg.
That's a number. From your bottle to your manifold, and then manifold to the keg. Now here I do like to generally build with about 3 feet for each line off my manifold. And the reason I do that is just to give me some flexibility. I don't have to disconnect kegs when I go change out a keg. 'Cause every single time you blow a keg, it's the one at the very back. And rather than disconnecting a bunch of kegs because the lines are too short, I could just move the keg out. If I have 3 feet on the manifold, I can move the keg out of the way, onto the ground, grab the empty, get on with my day. So for an extra couple bucks in hoses for gas line,
Easy
fix,
convenience.
and you don't have to do anything.
Yep.
This I like. You're gonna need some clamps, and I do recommend the Oetiker style, or also known as a stepless or PEX style clamp. These are the little crimp clamps.
Yep. This is the hardest thing. This is the most. This is right here is the most vulnerable part in your system.
Yeah, most of your hardware that attaches the clamp. So a lot of your hose line, your gas hose is usually going to be about 5/16 inside diameter hose. That's rated for like 130 psi burst pressure. We're not going to be running at those levels, so it's totally fine. But all the hardware is usually matched to 5/16 as well, so we really need to clamp that down. And I like the Oetiker stepless style because they compress in 360 degrees. Those worm style or the twist style that you use a screwdriver with a little handle.
Yeah. All right, so tell me, where do I get these?
Oh, I got them. Like a 15.7 mil.
Do they take a
clamp.
tool?
You can. They do make some tools that give you some more clamping advantage, but you can also just use a pair of a pair of Dykes side cutters.
Okay.
Even the small ones, you might have to go on either side of the clamp.
Right.
You just crimp this little tab together.
Cool. Possible.
Yeah. The worm style, the ones you got to thread in with like a screwdriver or a nut driver, or maybe it has a little handle on it. The hardware for that, none of that section moves or bends.
Right.
So all those clamps, as they get down to that clamp size that we need, get egg shaped.
Yeah.
Guess where the leak is?
Down there.
Down in the egg shape. So, these are the Oetiker stepless. They're single use, but they work.
Yep.
And that's where you want. It's not worth saving a couple. If I'm worried about destroying the clamp every time I have to change something, that's cheaper than replacing a gas bottle because it got a leak in it.
Right.
So, that's throwing good money after bad, kind of thing. So your regulator, it's important to know kind of what's going on. Where it threads into the bottle, there is a gasket in there. A lot of the modern regulators or quality regulators will have a gasket installed where it interfaces with the gas bottle. So if you have a gasket pre-installed in your regulator, you don't need the one that comes with the gas bottle. Some of the older style regulators did not come with a gasket, so you get a brand new felt washer. Compressed felt washer with every bottle, and they still do that for some of these older models. But if you already have a gasket installed, you don't need another one. More gaskets is more leaks in this equation, and we don't want to over tighten. When I attach my regulator to the gas bottle, I'm usually about a quarter turn past hand tight. When I'm threading it on there by hand, I need to support the weight of my regulator and keep it level to the fitting. There's going to be a little bit of play in the nut, and if it's crooked, I can bottom the nut out and it'll cinch up tight, and I'll still have a leak. So I support the regulator, keep it level, go hand tight, and I'll usually go about a quarter turn past. I like my regulators to stare.
That's good nut tightening practice.
You don't want to over tightening is no good. It's no good. I like my gauges to stare up at me at sort of a 45-degree angle. So when I go hand tight, I'm usually forward 45 degrees from, that. And so when I put that wrench on there, or that last quarter turn, the whole assembly sort of goes with it. And now my gauges stare up at me, and I don't have to bend over to read them. I like.
You draw little smiley faces on your.
I should.
Gauge
I should put some googly eyes on them. That's cool. What I really should do. Yeah.
Just a Sharpie.
So the gauges on there, they read opposite of whatever they're doing. So, in a double gauge regulator, the one farthest to the left is reading the tank pressure. And it's trying to equate the pressure of the tank to its volume. Again, we talked about that being a room temperature environment that it's reading for. The gauge at the top of the regulator, that reads opposite to your hose. So that is your line pressure or your regulated pressure gauge. So that's the really, really important one. I've broken all of my tank pressure gauges and I've never replaced them, and they're fine. They work great. They're 15 years old. Nobody cares. They do make replacements, but I don't monkey with it. So those are the two gauges. You usually have a pressure relief valve somewhere on there. Some of them will have a pin that you can pull the pressure relief. Those are kind of nice. Other ones are just going to be this weird looking nut that has holes in the side, and you can kind of peer through the holes and you'll see a little bit of a spring in there. And that spring tension is what's keeping the gas in. It's kind of an emergency blow. It's the my lawyer made me put it in there.
Yep.
Your bottle is rated for like 3,000 psi, but this thing's set to 150.
Right.
So if the pressure ever increases above that, there's all sorts of safety involved in these systems.
Yeah, because you don't want it to blow. It's
a bad idea. It's a bad idea.
And I've had that regulator check valve go.
Yeah,
before.
Yeah. They're not rated. I've got some. I had somebody call me up. They bought a regulator and then freaked out because they plugged it in and the damn thing started blowing. Well, when they installed the nut on the regulator, which is the adjustment nut. Well, they just kept going and turning it on, so they turned it all the way on, which is more than the pressure for the relief valve. So the relief valve started blowing, and they're freaking out, and it's traumatic.
Yeah,
let's don't do that. So that's the gauges. So your regulated pressure gauge, that's your top gauge. A good 10 psi is going to be your buddy. On most of your small kegerators, your short pour systems, 10 psi is perfectly adequate for what we need. It'll give us 2.3 volumes of CO2, which is appropriate for 99% of the beers you're going to make, and at 5 feet of beer line, that's a completely balanced pour. And we're going to talk about balancing that pour here in a minute. But that's a really, really fantastic way to do it. There's other ways to carbonate. We can put it at 10 psi and walk away for a week, and we're
carbonated beer.
The advantage is we're adding a little maturity in there. We may be able to hasten carbonation, but we cannot quicken maturation. So adding an extra week into the profile benefits your beer. And you can't over carbonate it. It's only going to be 2.3 volumes of CO2. That's fine. There are some faster ways to do that.
You can release that carbonation if it's too over-carbonated.
If you over-carbonate it, you can.
Oh, yeah. I've spent many a nights every 2 hours.
Yeah. So first we'll talk about how to get there faster, and then I'll talk about what happens when you fuck it up. One of the ways to get there faster is to crank that sumbitch up to 50 psi.
I wouldn't do that.
I've done it.
Yeah.
Overnight at 50 psi. The PRVs are usually like 60 or above on those systems, so 50 is not going to do it. Your hoses are rated for 130.
Yeah,
your tank is 160. Or
I just don't ever think I did that much.
It doesn't.
Like 30 or something.
I mean, I'm thirsty, but if I make more beer, I solve for that even better. So 50 psi overnight, you can get some carbonate, but you can overdo it. Carbonation is a function of pressure and temperature. So if your temperature is colder today, for whatever reason,
if you're pushing 50. I mean, and you push 50 for an extra hour.
That's a different animal.
Yeah.
The other way I did for years was I would do 30 psi for 24 hours.
That's not bad.
Yeah, and after 24 hours, I would disconnect the gas line to the keg. I'd reset my regulator to 10 psi, and I'd vent the line pressure. That way I could see the gauge move, right? If I vent the line pressure, if I turn it down and vent it, it resets that gauge. You can't just turn down your regulator and watch the pressure drop, because the line is still pressurized at whatever the highest was. So if it was at 30 psi and I just turn it down, it still says 30 psi. So on your gray quick connect for your ball lock fittings or pin lock fittings, you can push the little pin, depressurize the line.
Man, that always hurt my finger too.
It's kind of tight. It's by design.
I get a little tool.
Yeah. A thimble. Maybe a thimble.
Thimble.
Yeah.
The thimble gets stuck right there.
Why is there a thimble in your kegerator? Because I have sensitive fingers.
My sensitive fingertips.
So reset that line and reattach the keg. You still have 30 psi head pressure for the next 24 hours. It's going to absorb that, and you're going to be able to drink it on day 4.
Yeah.
And that works. That if you're brewing on Wednesday and need beer by Saturday, this is or if you're kegging a beer on Wednesday and brewing on drinking on Saturday.
Wow.
That's
We're
how you're going to
talking
do that.
Kveik, yeah.
You can use priming sugar in the keg, but I kind of have to ask, it's possible, but why? Because to carbonate your beer fully, it takes about 3 ounces of CO2. So Why?
3 ounces of
3
CO2
ounces of
versus
CO2. And
3 ounces of,
yeah,
or how much sugar would it take?
5 ounces of sugar. Yeah.
And that's going to be more expensive, actually.
Yeah.
And
More
it's
than
going
that
to change
gas.
your flavor.
Yeah.
profile.
The other drawback is because you just put the lid on there. If your lid isn't on just right, as your pressure starts increasing, it goes through the leak, and you won't know it. If you just force carbonate it with gas, when you put the gas on there, if your lid's not on all the way, you know about it. You can hear the gas coming out of it. Like if it takes a day to ramp up to eat those sugars and make the CO2 to leak out of the lid,
every time
you
that
won't
I'm
know about it.
Dealing with this, I have my spray bottle of Star San.
It's pretty good.
And so when you hook up your CO2, make sure you Star San around that lid, and then that will create bubbles if it's got a leak.
Yeah. So, yeah, you could use some sugar in the keg, but
it's not worth it.
Why? So overcarbonation disasters. You've got it at 50 psi, but then you forgot to turn it down the next morning, and now you've got a bomb.
Yeah.
You can decarbonate it, and you're gonna have to shake the shit out of your beer.
You don't even have to shake it at first.
Yeah, just like letting the pressure
just
off.
Let the pressure
at
off.
that given temperature.
And it's gonna go everywhere.
Yeah, and it's gonna take some
make
time.
A mess.
But you can also shake it and vent it and shake it and vent it and shake it and vent it. But you'll never know where you're at. So if you're gonna to get it to the right so if you try to speed carbonate it and then go too high, just put it at 10 psi on the second go round, because that's all it can take. You can't go over that at 10 psi. When you're depressurizing, you're not going to know.
I would put it at 6.
You're still gonna have flat. Then you have flat beer.
No.
10 psi. If you shake the shit out of it,
I would put it at 6.
You'd be wasting time if you did. So
hey, our second argument.
It's great. It's fine. It's fine. It's good quality. It's what you pay for. Not that you're paying for it. You get it for free.
Get this from free.
We talked about
all of
CO2.
Our podcasts.
We talked about CO2.
Wherever you get your podcast.
We talked about CO2 inside versus outside. Outside doesn't matter. Just that gauge is another thing. So how much CO2 really gets used inside this keg? I talked about it a minute ago. To carbonate your beer to 2.5 volumes, for 5 gallons at 2.5 volumes of CO2, that takes about 3.3 ounces.
Well, I'll tell you, folks.
That's nothing.
The more beer you drink out of the keg, the more CO2 it takes.
Well, to push it out. Pushing it out is a totally different animal. It takes a half a pound of gas to push 15 gallons of beer.
Yeah.
Every time you put it, every time you take some beer out, it's going to add a little gas just to maintain the carbonation
level.
profile.
Yep.
So,
and that's important. You need to make sure you have it turned up.
10 psi. We're going to
6.
10, and I'm going to talk about why.
Okay.
So your bottle's 4.5 pounds nominally filled. This is for safety reasons. You have a full tank.
Maybe my lines were a little closer to my taps.
So it's really about a balanced pour, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, because we're doing two different things at once. We're trying to maintain a carbonation level, and then we're trying to deliver it appropriately.
Yep.
If your lines are too long or your pressure's too short, you've got agitation, and which is going to be foam, and foam sucks. I mean, it's 25% beer in that foam, but if you have a pint full of foam, you have a problem. We're going to talk about how to correct for that here in just a minute. So stick around. I mentioned 4.5 pounds is the nominal fill level for your CO2 tank. Even though it says 5 pounds in the bottle, it's 4.5 pounds. This is done for safety reasons. If you leave your CO2 bottle in a hot car, that gas is going to expand. The pressure is going to increase, which could blow a safety valve, safety PRV on your keg. And if you're driving, that is going to, at best, pucker your butt. At worst, it's going to cause an accident, and nobody wants that liability. So nobody fills those things to the top. Yeah. It's not safe to do so and send that out into the wild. So they don't do it. One of the things you're going to run into on tanks, industrial grade CO2 versus food grade CO2. We're talking about a difference of like point something percent pure industrial versus, it's like 98 versus 99% pure.
Now, does our
CO2.
alcohol in our beer kind of mitigate that risk?
they're talking about the purity of the CO2. The CO2 in there. All that CO2 really comes from the same source.
Are we going to use the food grade, or are we going to use the?
The good news is all of them are food grade.
Okay, good.
None of your gas suppliers are going to stock industrial grade because it doesn't cost them. There's no difference in cost because they all really come from the same fucking place. So they purify it, so we don't have to worry about that. So you're always going to get food grade CO2, even if you're buying from a welding shop or somebody who gets their stuff filled at a welding shop. It's always food grade CO2. You're totally fine because it's not worth stocking two different things and doing all that mumbo jumbo work. Corny keg anatomy. We should probably talk a little bit about that because there's some things to avoid. You've got two posts on there, gas in post and a beverage out post, and these are different. They look similar, but they are different, and your hardware is not interchangeable on them. Now they do make some that is universal for both. They're all gray, but then all your stuff's gray, and you got to buy all new stuff.
You can push one of the.
You could put the gas onto the beverage side, but if you put the gas, or if you can put the beverage on the gas side,
right?
But if you force the gas onto the beverage side, you're cutting it off,
right?
And one of the differences, so they're a ball lock, which means there's a ball bearing that sits into, has to get over a hump and then sits in a groove, and that's what holds it tight against the seal, and that's kind of how they work. Well, on the beverage side, that's a big shoulder that has to clear and a bit deeper gully.
Yep.
And so if we put the smaller gas side on it, it's a lot harder to get off.
And you're fighting it. Okay, so you have 3 beers in you. You've brewed all night long. You now or you kegged your beer, and now you're trying to shove your fittings onto your keg.
Yeah.
Take care when you do that.
If you see
make sure that
don't
you're putting
force anything.
Right
Don't force anything.
Because if you force it, it's like, oh my god, I'm not gonna get that back off there. It's hard.
If you do a disassembly in your keg, I tend to also like to put all my gas hardware on one side of the bench and my beer, the beer side on the other side, so I can't mix them up.
Brewing is simple. It's complex, but it's simple.
Yeah.
If it doesn't work, don't do it.
And I try to take my brain out of the equation because after doing 1,000 of these damn things, I don't think, I'm not paying as close attention because it's all very routine, and I'm
right.
There's this whole complacency thing. I've done this before.
Over and over.
So anything I can do to mitigate for that. So telling the difference between those two posts, back to the kegs, anatomy,
is important.
You can. There's a couple of visual indicators on the posts themselves. The biggest one is on the gas post. If you look at it, where there's usually like a hex. Tool surface, so you could put a wrench on it. Sometimes it's like a 5/16, or there's a couple different sizes depending on the manufacturer. But it's hex shaped, or maybe it's like a multi-point, 24-point wrench shape. So you can put a tool on there. If you look at that, there's always like a gash through it. It's a gash for gas. They always just etch that tool set surface. So if you see one of those, you can see right away that that's your gas side. Your beverage side doesn't have that, but it has the bigger shoulder that the ball lock has to clear.
They're 2 different diameters.
Yeah, they are 2 different diameters, and that's why they're not interchangeable.
But the ball shoulder is further down from like the top of the post. One of them is further down, and you can see.
Yeah,
that
and one of them is bigger than the other one too. So the big one's for beer, big beer, B beer. That's kind of a thing. On your keg itself.
See, this is why I go Sankey.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to worry about this.
It has pitfalls too. It has pitfalls too. One of the reasons I don't recommend Sankey is sourcing them. You have to buy them new for $130. You cannot use the one you got from the brewery because that's actually theft. That's the brewery's property. The deposit you pay for that keg does not cover the cost of that.
Oh,
keg.
Sankey keg.
Sankey keg.
Yeah. I thought you were talking about decoupler. You could buy a Sankey keg for about $110.
$110 to $130. Yep. It's cheaper to buy a pallet.
That's worth it. Yeah. Don't.
If you're making 15 gallons, but most of us are making 5 gallons.
If you buy a keg from somebody somewhere else that has a name
somebody
on
else's stuff, that's their shit. Yeah,
that's theirs.
Don't do that.
That's their property.
Don't be that guy.
I did have a brewery sell me his 15.5s.
Yeah, I remember you picked up a set a couple of kegs for me from a brewery down south many years ago.
Here somewhere, yeah.
Yeah, and they were decommissioned, bad spears on them or something, and I turned them into kegels, and they were fine. Yep. So there are legit ways to get those things, and then there are not legit ways. So that's 2 different posts. Your keg itself, you got 2 different length dip tubes. You got a short one, that's for the gas. So the gas goes in on the top, and the beer comes out the bottom. So you got a long dip tube, that's your beverage side.
And you have a gasket.
And there's a gasket on each of those.
Yes.
And
have to make sure it's there. And
so
clean.
so match your gas post to your short dip tube when you're doing a reinstall. Do that, because I've bought reconditioned kegs, and they've come from some well-known distributor out of San Leandro, California, that rhymes with schmore, and I've gotten kegs that have the post on the wrong fucking side, and it's a pain in the. I mean, it's not a pain in the butt, but I hate selling one and then having it like, why doesn't this work? Because some knucklehead fucking put them on the wrong side.
Aren't both posts the same?
No, the posts are different.
The posts are different.
The 2 posts on the keg so
on the corny keg.
On the corny keg where the post threads
line?
into, both of those are the same. The dip tube's different. But I've got them from Schmore, and they've put the beverage post on the gas dip tube, and vice versa. I won't mention their names, but they run with Schmore. Schmoresmear.com. Schmoresmine, they have a whole wine division too.
Schmoresmine.
But I've gotten their reconditioned kegs, and whoever.
Oh, and they reconditioned them and then
they
swapped
them. They put them on the wrong side, and then that's kind of.
Okay. So then the posts are different. From the gas to the serving.
Where the post in terms of where you attach the corny keg coupler on your hose, those are different. We talked about one's got a gash on it, one's got a bigger ball bearing.
Yeah. But on the corny keg itself, if everything's disassembled,
they call them like a body connect post.
I'm cleaning them. I'm cleaning my corny kegs.
Those are generally
got them all just taken apart.
And it depends on the manufacturer. Sometimes the manufacturers put like a little
countersink
one of the, or like an edge on one of the posts that only goes in one hole.
Yep.
Because sometimes the bottom is shaped just for like a straight dip tube versus a curved dip tube, and there's like all sorts of. There's some noodly bits about it. There's like 10 manufacturers of these fucking things.
Pay attention to that.
Yeah.
Pay attention to your equipment. Yeah. Basically, because I had 3 or 4 different styles of keg.
Yeah, there's several different manufacturers.
Cornelius kegs. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, I've had some, with various nut sizes, and some are interchangeable, some are not. There's, I think Firestone Walker, they made a bunch of proprietary shit that doesn't fucking work on any of the other ones, and none of the other rebuild or aftermarket rebuild stuff works on them. So it's kind of, there's the thing. We're dealing with a bunch of aging, infrastructure that's no longer in use, from Pepsi, Pepsi, Coca-Cola, RC Cola, all the brands used to ship this shit out 5 gallons at a time. And so some of them had their own proprietary shit. Like Coca-Cola used the pin lock keg, whereas everybody else used a ball lock keg, which is why there's more ball locks than pin locks. Even though Coca-Cola's the #1 brand, everybody else used, it's like Apple versus Macintosh and Chevy versus Ford
and the rest of the cars.
Yeah.
All right.
So that's kind of like keg anatomy 101. We talked about cleaning it. Use your PBW, use your Star Sand to clean those things out. Cleaning your lines is a little bit different. Cleaning your beer lines, you're going to either use a caustic cleaner or products like Beer Line Cleaner, or BLC.
Which is different than PBW.
It's different. It's designed to eat up beer stone, and beer stone is a protein deposit left over.
And caustic has to be used at a certain temperature.
Hot caustic,
in order for it to work.
And it'll melt your skin off. It's
not good. You have to use gloves.
Yep, and iPro and all sorts of, and you have to rinse really well, and there's rinse indicators and all sorts of stuff.
Right.
If I was doing like a bunch of draft cleaning, as a service for a client, I would probably be using caustics and pumps and all that stuff. But for the rest of us in the homebrew land, products like Beer Line Cleaner do an excellent job.
PBW?
PBWs, if you do it frequently, like every couple of weeks, might be okay. But most of us probably only clean our lines when the kegs blow.
Say this.
And I know, we've all been there.
I don't even want to say this. I don't know how good this is. When I have my kegs disassembled and I have all of my parts, I'll put a drop of Dawn in each one of my kegs, and that's it. A drop of Dawn, and fill that keg up quarter of the way, and put that big brush in there on my drill, and I clean that keg in 30 seconds, and then rinse it out, and then I'm rinsing. Now, I mean, Dawn on stainless steel works really well.
It's not a function of its efficacy.
You have to clean it off.
It's a function of the chelators, the surfactants and chelators, which is shit they talk about in soap land all the time. It just really breaks up the surface tension water, allows it to get into small cracks so that that water can clean better. That is the function of soap. With the exception of like caustic cleaners, which actually break down deposits, alkaline cleaners that actually break down deposits.
Well, that's why I use
your
a
Dawn
brush.
dish soap. Some of the surfactants and chelators that they use in there are highly reactive in beer, and so if we don't do a good job rinsing, we can get some really
I know that's why
reactive
that's
compounds.
why I didn't want to say it.
Yeah,
but
so products like PBW and beer line cleaner are from the ground up designed for the kinds of grime that we're going to run into in the brew house. Beer line cleaner is really good at beer stone, which is that protein deposit in your lines. Your lines should be cleaned it's recommended every 2 weeks. Every week you should be disassembling your faucets and cleaning those, because there's a lot of build. I mean, I've done some commercial cleanups, and
even if they sit. And if they sit, it makes it worse.
There's some gunk in there.
Yeah.
And that gunk is in every beer that gets poured. And so reputable beer service locations will clean their lines regularly, and you should too. And use the right products for them. Don't get in there and scrub it. These products do the work for you, so you don't have to scrub it. Vinyl's very soft. If we etch it, now we have a crap catcher, and that's just going to be a bug breeding ground.
It builds up faster.
It's no bueno. Every 2 weeks, clean your faucets every week. Just disassemble them, rinse them, give them a good rinse out, and reinstall
It's easy.
them. They're easy.
Have a little bucket.
Here's probably the biggest topic on here is when you get a leak. I've said it before. It's not a function of if you get a leak. It is when you get a leak.
Now we talking leaks of beer?
Gas leak.
Or
gas leak. It's the one, like leaking beer, like, oh, that sucks. It's usually obvious where the source is.
Oh my God! Now now 5 gallons of my beer in the bottom of my.
Oh yeah, especially in like a keezer. I've known guys who've opened their keezer to half a keezer full of beer outside the keg and no good. But a gas leak, it's invisible. The gas is invisible. You can't see what the fuck is going on. All of a sudden your gas bottle's empty and it was brand fucking new. This is where I like to get methodical about it. And I use leak testing solution, and I recommend you do too. It's worth its weight in CO2. This is a thickened liquid that is really good at seeing bubbles. It's far better at bubbling than even Star Sand. It's fantastic. Like I said,
like for super minute.
Yeah,
leak.
and you get the gas, like wherever they sell like gas hardware for your like hot water heaters or whatever, they'll have like a leak testing solution. It's usually like a purple, blue, or pink liquid. Sometimes it's green. I like the ones that have like an applicator, like a giant Q-tip on the lid. They make cement.
Like
rubber cement has the shit on the lid. Yeah. I like those ones. They make some that are in a spray bottle, but in order to make them work in the spray bottle, they have to thin it out even more, which is counterproductive to what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
So, if you have a leak, you're going to swab all your connection. If it's threaded, clamped, any meeting of two materials, even if they're the same kind of material,
threaded or clamped.
Get some goop around there.
Yep.
And check your regulator too. So often it's overlooked where on the regular housing where your adjustment knob is, that whole housing is threaded on there, and that holds the diaphragm that's doing all the work inside your regulator. Get some stuff around that and make sure it's not.
Now sometimes we have some goop that we put around the threads.
That's thread tape. That's a little bit different.
Yeah.
That's for closing up gap on tapered fittings and giving us a good seal. But checking for leaks, if you see there was thread tape on it, definitely get some solution on there. Now, what'll often happen, especially if you have multiple kegs on a manifold, you're trying to find a leak, you're going to go through the whole system, swabbing everything, and you still won't find it because you're in a hurry and you're frustrated. And this is okay. This is the time to charge up the system with your fresh gas bottle, get pressure on all the kegs, disconnect all the kegs, turn all the valves off on your manifold, at your bottle, and then your tank off. And what you've done is isolate gas in several sections. You've isolated from the bottle to the end of the regulator. You've isolated from your regulator to your manifold. You've isolated from your manifold to each of your beer lines. Each of those is a separate space. And you've also isolated in the keg. So if you can't find a leak on the first try, charge the system up just like that. Go grab a beer and come back tomorrow. Because tomorrow you're going to independently test each of those sections. On your keg, you'll pull the PRV. If you hear gas, it held pressure overnight, it passes. If you get to a keg that doesn't make any noise when you pull the pin, it's failed. And you got to remember the golden rule, though. Just because you find one leak doesn't mean you don't have two. Yeah. So you're going to do the rest of the test. Test the rest of your kegs on each of your lines coming off your manifold. Push the pin to depressurize that line from the manifold. If one of those doesn't make any noise, you've got a leak somewhere in that line. By isolating, like when we isolated everything the day before, we've now narrowed our choices down to that keg and that line. Everything else passed. Yep. So now I can be a little more patient about testing again with the leak testing solution. I know what region to look at.
We're troubleshooting the entire system.
That
step by step.
It's kind of a pain in the ass,
Kegs,
but man,
to our lines.
This will set you free. Yep. Getting methodical about this will take some time, but
because it can be frustrating.
Being frustrated about it for longer. I mean, I know guys who have had leaks in their keg for years, and they go to the kegerator, they turn the gas on,
turn it off,
pour a beer, turn it off. Yeah. And they do that for years because they can't find the fucking leak. But they're pissed off about it. But they're pissed off about it the whole fucking time too. They're not looking right.
They're not looking. They're not doing the diligence of isolating the problem.
So let's talk about the perfect pour.
Perfect pour.
The perfect pour. We're trying to do two different things. We're trying to maintain introduce carbonation and maintain it at a certain level. We're also trying to deliver it appropriately.
Right.
I like a 7 to 10 second pour. I like quarter to a half inch head on that, and I it doesn't have to be too fast, and it's not too slow, and it's not full of foam. Because I tell you, foam is a symptom of an unbalanced pour, but it's not a diagnostic system. It doesn't tell me my pressure is high or low. It doesn't tell me my line length is.
You said 7 to 10 second pour.
7 to 10 second pour.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm drinking beer. I'm fine. I don't need it. I don't need it 3 minutes in 37 milliseconds.
Right.
Yeah.
That just
because I can say,
that's cool.
The reality is, I'm going to pick, with a 7 second pour, I'm going to get that pint and I'm going to drink half of it right away, and then I'm going to go back for the other half,
right? And
then I'm going to go inside.
So you got beer and a half for like 12 seconds.
It's fine. So we're talking about balance. At 10 psi, I'm going to get 2.3 volumes of CO2, and volumes. This is one that's kind of confusing for everybody. Volumes of CO2 is kind of a noodly way of describing it. We could just say, I carbonated at 10 psi. But at 10 psi at 34 degrees versus 50 degrees is two different amounts of CO2 because they're pressure and temperature dependent. And this is the same. This is kind of like the opposite of like dissolving sugar in water.
Yeah, gas expansion.
Right. I can dissolve an amount of sugar at room temperature water, but if I boil the water, I can dissolve more sugar in there. Well, the inverse is true for gas. So the colder the temperature, the more gas I can put in there. So at 34 degrees or sub 40, which is default position on my refrigerator, 2.3 volumes of CO2 is achieved at 10 psi. Fantastic. That's appropriate for 99% of the beers I'm going to make. 2.5 might be a little bit better, but now I have to deliver that beer, and I might have to go uphill. I might have to go down to the other end of the bar. Hell, in a long pour, in some of these old school bars, they had beers in the cellar, and they go upstairs to the beers. They got a lot of gravity to overcome, and so it requires more pressure to do that. Well, too much pressure is effectively shaking the can on the way to your face when you open a beer. If there's not enough pressure, you have all the friction in the line, which is effectively shaking the can on the way to your face. So we really kind of have to balance that. 10 psi at 5 feet of beer line is a balance pour at 2.3 volumes of CO2. If you want to dial in a different volume of CO2 for your given temperature, I recommend checking out a line length calculator. I'll put a link in the show notes from like kegerator.com. They've got an easy calculator. It says, I want this, at this, at this, and it does the math for me and tells me how much line I need. Because it's one of these like really big matrix, like equations, because I've got coefficient of friction and vertical travel and all this crap I have to account for.
Yep.
Then I don't want to do math. I want to drink beer.
Drink it.
So 10 psi, you can, I'll also put in here a link to a carbonation chart at any given temperature. This is, any regulator or regulator pressure setting. It'll tell us how much gas we want. We can make that decision for our tastes and styles. Maybe I'm doing a lambic today and I want 3.3 volumes of CO2. I might need a longer line to do that. That's okay. Line's cheap. So, kind of which brings up to kind of those common issues in my kegerating system and the fixes. So why is my beer foamy is the number one question I get at the shop. I've mentioned it before. Foam is a symptom, but not a diagnostic one. There are 3 reasons we get foamy beer. We have agitation and temperature change and oxygen exposure. Now, oxygen exposure is the easiest one to rule out, because if we have oxygen exposure in our draft line, it is always accompanied by a puddle of beer. How else does the oxygen? If the oxygen can get to my beer, the beer can also get out. Hence a puddle. So if you don't see a puddle, right off the bat, we can tick off oxygen exposure.
No more oxygen.
Now, when I pour the beer, we can get oxygen exposure as well, right there. And we want that. We want the head that we want on our beer.
Right, but that's not going to make it really foamy.
Temperature changes, whether we go up in temperature, if the beer is a different temperature in the keg versus ambient.
Through your tap handle.
That's going to change things. If we, whether it goes, the temperature changes up or down, that can cause gases to liquid CO2 to become gas really quickly, aka foam. And this is why I say do not freeze your glassware, because that frozen glass is going to be colder than the beer in the keg, which is going to cause foam. I don't know what barkeep thought that was a nifty idea, that frosted fucking glass, and it
selling
looked good
less beer.
It looked like, probably.
Yeah.
And more foam and less beer,
foam, less
he made
beer.
money. So don't perpetuate that myth. On tower systems, your first pours are always your worst pours, because the beer that's in that 1 foot tower is subject to ambient temperature far more than the beer that's in the keg. So that first pour is always going to be the worst. Every bar on the block has the same problem when they open up. Their first pours suck, and there's always that one guy sitting at the end, and he don't care. He's gonna, he's like, oh no, give that one to me. It's Larry, and he's got his fucking, his seat, his ass print is molded to that seat, and he never leaves, and he's there at opening because he gets a free beer or free pint of foam.
Maybe 2.
So on your tower systems, you can kind of combat that with a tower fan that blows cold air up into your tower at the back side of your faucet. And that's going to help. They're still going to be the worst ones the first time. This is just like your shower. You get in the shower in the morning, you turn on the hot water.
I don't want to waste my beer.
You're not wasting your beer. This is just a function of physics now.
Right.
But just like in your shower, when you turn the hot water on, all of the pipes from your hot water heater to your faucet head have to heat up before you get any hot water.
Right. So my first beer is, half a beer is not the greatest.
You set it aside for later. Just deal with it. You can combat it with a tower fan. That's going to help. Don't use that frozen glassware. So you're going to manage for temperature changes. The most common reason we get foam in beer is through agitation. If our beer lines are too long, or there's too much pressure, or they're dirty lines, all of those things increase friction or increase turbulence, which is shaking the can on the way to your face. You could have hops. Say from a really hoppy IPA, some of that hop kind of packed up into the either the faucet or the post in your keg. That's increasing friction, which is causing agitation. If we are not running at the right pressure, the friction inside that line is shaking the beer on the way to our glass. So we have to check our line length. We can check our pressure. Are we clean? Do we have clean lines? Clean glassware. As a dirty glass is going to have increased friction on the inside of it, and that's going to cause foam too. So check all those things out. If you want further reading on kind of troubleshooting your draft system, there's an amazing book put out by the Brewers Association. It was written for beer servers or bar owners who don't have a background in beer. But it's 124 pages of draft beer goodness. You can look it up online. I'll put a link in the show notes. Draft Beer Quality Manual, and you can download that straight to your hard drive for free. And it's more information than you probably wanted. We're into like an hour and a half on this show, and I'm just covering the basics. That thing's going to get into the rest of it. Next thing that next troubleshooting item, my beer tastes off. What happened? Some of those problems are, oxidation. Maybe I wasn't as good at keeping oxygen out when I packaged my keg, and I packaged it with oxygen on the headspace. That's going to lead to cardboard flavors. I could have dirty lines, and I can get diacetyl kind of, build up in those lines and give me like a buttery popcorn shitty flavor, and that's not tasty. So check on those.
That's
kind of
usually your first. That's usually
dirty
your
lines.
First sign.
If your beer tastes weird, check the lines.
Yep.
That's the thing.
It builds up. I mean, you'd be amazed.
I can't get the connector on my post. I get this call all the time. Well, did you put it on the right one?
Right.
Because if you mixed them up, so we talked about how to identify those things. If it's not on the correct side, if it is on the correct side and you're getting resistant, there's two reasons. One, the gasket's dried out. There's a little O-ring on there. Get a little keg lube on there, and that'll ease its transition back into place. The other one is you could have dirty ball lock fittings. It's a ball lock, so there's a ball bearing that's holding the whole show, holding it tight. But if you pull the collar on your quick connect fitting and the ball bearings don't move, they don't spin and they don't push, wiggle around, that means there's beer stone built up on them and they've seized. So they don't move, so they're not getting out of the way when you try to attach it.
Now
what they need to do.
I clean those fittings as well.
You can.
And yes, you should.
You definitely should.
You take a flathead screwdriver, unscrew it, easy enough. All comes apart. Just pay attention what way the spring goes in, and how it goes in there.
Just, I like to make, if I'm disassembling something for the first time, I kind of make like an expanded diagram of it, and I take a picture of
exploded
view,
yes.
so I can put it back together the right way. And this is how we learn things.
Great idea.
You don't have to fuck it up too many times. It's another question I get. My regulator or my tap keeps sticking. This is kind of a common one in some of the inexpensive faucet heads, the non-forward sealing designs. If we don't drink beer often enough, the beer can actually dry up, and that beer stone, it's a protein glue, and protein glues are probably, there's some of the stronger glues and adhesives that we can make. And if you've ever left egg dribbled onto your countertop and then tried to pick it off, you kind of get the idea of how strong some of these protein glues are. So the proteins in beer, they dry up and they kind of just cement the whole show together. I had 4 guys last year in the same week came in with broken brass faucet handles.
Yeah.
The part that goes through the handle and into the shank or into the faucet itself.
I've had a bad
4 of them
before.
broke off because they just yoinked on them. And it's like, good news, I got a replacement for you.
Here you go.
Now this one's stainless steel, so it's just going to be stuck. So if you have kind of one of those $20 faucet heads, you're going to want to clean that regularly.
Yep.
Or drink more often. That's a good idea. My next question I get a lot is my regulator pressure is creeping up. I just set it at 10 psi and it came back tomorrow and it's 18 or 24 or 30. This is called regulator creep, and the most common cause of this is your diaphragm has died. The business end of that, maybe the spring went bad or the seal around that on the inside of your regulator shit the bed. Some models are replaceable, some are not. And if you can't find a brand name on your regulator, good luck finding parts for it. That's the most common one I see. The other one, it could just be the gauges shit. And some of those are replaceable. It's kind of standard threading. You can find replacements if it's the gauge, but most often it's your regulator. If your regulator pressure is creeping up and your beer is cold, it's not because it's fermenting in there. It's because the diaphragm is shit.
Get a new regulator.
Sometimes. There are cheap regulators out there. They don't have a brand name on them. Some of those cheap regulators also make lousy toilet paper.
What?
Yeah, a cheap regulator also makes lousy toilet paper. I mean,
Wow.
I wouldn't wipe my ass with them.
Kimberly Clark?
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about?
There's some real garbage ones that I wouldn't wipe my ass with. So there we go.
I could say that. I used to work for Kimberly Clark.
There you go. Upgrades. So there's a couple cool things you can do with a kegerator once you build one.
Yep. Well, add new taps.
That's cool.
If you have room.
If you got room in there, wanting a new flavor.
I should have added 2 more.
Yeah, more beer. That's a good thing.
Yes.
You can put drip trays on there that catch the dribbles.
Drip trays are cool.
Yeah, drip trays are cool.
Needed.
Do clean those out. If you get drip trays, do clean those out. One of the old tap cleaning services I used to talk to says it was the number one thing you'd get is like you get a call every fall because there's fruit flies in the whole show, and it's always because they didn't clean out the drip tray. Nitro taps.
Ooh,
that's kind of cool.
That is kind of cool.
Yeah. Whether it's the stout faucet with its star tip or without the star tip, we'll talk about that some other show. Those are kind of cool. You can do a nitro pour or cold brew coffee in your kegerator. That's kind of cool.
That'd be good.
Maybe you want to do soda mixers, like have Coca-Cola or Sprite on tap.
Right.
You can make some of that yourself.
One of my 6 was dedicated to carbonated water.
Oh yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. You know how much seltzer water I drink?
Mm-hmm.
It's obscene.
I love it.
It's obscene.
And it's super easy, and you just add the spring water right to one of the kegs. It's always in the
and
kegerator.
They have
I never even have to lift the keg out of the kegerator.
They have even cool ones that have like it's a perpetual carbonated water. So it's a lid you put on a corny keg, then you hook it up to your water main.
That's cool.
And it's got a CO2 directly into it, so it carbonates the water as it's filling it, and every time you pour it off, it fills it back up with carbonated water, and you can just flavor it in the glass, and you have a perpetual. So take that, LaCroix. We got your fucking number now.
Mio or whatever.
If you do soda and you want a root beer line for the kiddos, maybe, or maybe you really like the root beer, do dedicate that line.
Yes.
And otherwise, root beer has a nasty habit of turning every other thing you run through it to root beer. It all tastes like root beer. It's a very strong flavor. It kind of stains your lines, with flavor component, and they'll always taste root beer. Yeah. So dedicate a line. Now this one might be one you want at like 3 volumes of CO2, and you're going to do about, so that might be like 20 PSI or 25 PSI and 16 feet of beer line on there to be an appropriate pour for a full-time soda fountain, which would be pretty cool.
With a dedicated equipment.
That's all right. That's all right.
So,
whew. Final thoughts. You should have a kegerator. You can't have a man cave without a kegerator.
Can't. And you can make a kegerator.
You can. And it's easy. You just got to find a refrigerator. And that might be an upright, a Keyser you can deal with, a mini fridge if it's
upright.
If it works. Find an appropriate size for the amount of beers you want to make. Build it out correctly. Watch out for, if you're building one and drilling holes, watch out for those electrical lines or some of the older models might have coolant lines in there. So watch out for that. Review the notes for this show when you do. We're going to put a link to that draft beer quality manual and the beer line calculator in here in the show notes so you can have those for you. And that, gosh, I'm going to wrap things up. We're kind of late into the season, into the show right now. But if you like this podcast, do subscribe to this show. Click that like button.
Find us everywhere you find your favorite podcasts.
We're on social media through Northwest Brewer Supply.
Enjoy the blog at Northwest Brewer Supply.
Yeah, it's the Hot Break blog at Northwest Brewer Supply. I write that as well as writing the content for this show. And we always got a new beer kit every other month, so check those out. And if you got a cool picture of your kegerator
Send
you want
it
to
in.
share, send that into the Facebook page, NWB Brewers on Facebook. I'll put a link
We'll
to that
highlight
in the
that.
show notes. I will put some pictures of some of these builds that I've done. Talk about that shelf and kind of identification for the post. I'll put some visuals on there for you guys as well. My voice is fading because it is late on a Wednesday, and I've drank half a gallon of
you
quarter
did?
gallon of beer. I had a quarter gallon of beer. I shared a quarter gallon with Andrew.
My voice is trashed and I'm drunk as fuck.
And that's not B-roll, kids.
Thank you for joining us. I know this went a nice long kegerator episode,
Yeah,
but that's
there's a
what
lot
we're
of
all
content.
about.
We
A
want to
lot.
make sure you
It's
guys
important.
get the right stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, all this stuff is important.
tune in-
Thank you, Ben, for
Thanks,
for
Andrew.
sharing all this with us.
And next week we've
Always
got
love it.
we've got a new episode for next week.
Oh,
We're
yeah.
gonna be recording. It's all about loggers.
All
We're
about
gonna take a deep dive into the loggers. There's some new cool research. There's some new angles on history that we want to share with you guys. So tune in next Wednesday.
You join us on
The
Beer
Beer
Craft.